Hello, YouTube. Michael Constantine here. I want to tell you about one of the biggest problems that special victims face, and that is swatting retaliation. People who come forward to law enforcement and social services are often retaliated against with reflexive false reports that perpetrators file against them. And rather than going through the process of verifying that those reports are in fact false, prior to coming back and making contact with the persons who filed the initial report, the authorities often come back reflexively to say, well, he said, she said. And what ends up happening is you've got a person who has suffered trauma or a family who's suffered trauma, and all of a sudden they're being traumatized even further with false allegations. The authorities come back, specifically social services. They won't tell you the allegations that have been stated against you. They won't provide you due process or give you a written explanation or any paperwork to say, well, hey, this is why we're here. This is what you were accused of. They won't tell you who accused you. And what ends up being the case is that you might have dozens of visits, and I'm not saying that metaphorically, I'm saying that literally, where again and again and again and again and again, for years, sometimes even decades, people will be coming back to harass you and your family without any probable cause or a warrant or due process observation. So this is why I came to the conclusion that special victims and their relatives, their dependents, especially children, the people who depend on those individuals who are being retaliated against, have to have an address that is not listed publicly with government, law enforcement, social services, or any other entity associated with the USPS mail system. In other words, only the persons who are trying to avoid further trauma complications on account of being retaliated against can know where they are. Them and people that they trust, which is usually a very short list. And the reason for this is that if there's a public record that reflects where that person and their dependents live, then the authorities may be used against them on an unlimited basis to inflict further trauma, which adds to any post-traumatic stress or complex post-traumatic stress that they may be suffering. And you end up with a person who is literally having dreams about the authorities visiting them or being in violent conflict with those authorities. I want you to imagine that that has happened, because it has. This is something that my family experienced firsthand. We're 6 years into a situation like that right now, and we have lost our home. My credit's ruined. My house foreclosed in the fall last year, and I'm afraid to take a public address because if I do, there's a high probability somebody's going to show up in order to interrogate us or further traumatize me and my dependents. All because we came forward against the people who sexually assaulted my spouse and hospitalized my child with chemical attack. And they did the same thing to me. They assaulted me using drugs, and there was nothing I could do. At the time, I couldn't even remember that it had happened because I had amnesia. This is the reason why people like us have to have some form of housing that is mobile and portable, or something that is in an undisclosed location in order to hide from those abusers, because they will try to retaliate when there's no hard evidence against them. that can be found at a given moment, they'll try to retaliate to target their victims. And those people end up living in perpetual fear. They can't build a life. They can't have a job that they physically show up at. They can't have a physical address that they're locatable at, because if they do, then they have to worry about the authorities using that to track them down and harass them on account of people who have already hurt them. And I know how this can be used too. I know that there are criminals out there who would try to use the same type of mode to hide when they've committed crimes. And it's unfortunate, but a lot of people who are victims of crime end up having to do something along those lines. They have to hide in order to stay safe for the people who are supposed to protect them, in order to avoid further complications adding to their trauma.